Johnny and I are music collaborators who have been working for about the past year, along with an artist called Stranger Cat, on Plastic the Album, which is the musical component of a novel I wrote that was out from Pantheon Books. So we've been working for about a year now, putting together an album that essentially takes the story of the book and the characters from the book, but then turns it into musical form in this new way. So it's been a really exciting process. And I was a fan of Johnny for many, many years before this, and so when I reached out to him about this, I was so excited that he came on board to work with me. So it's been a joy, and it's really exciting. It's out this Friday. Oh my gosh, yeah.
I know, it's so exciting to know it's like literally this is Hell Week. I'm curious in terms of, um, you know, here I'll have my proof of evidence here.
Whoa, there you go.
Um,
That's great.
so when I heard about the book, I actually saw it when I was walking around Barnes and Nobles one day, and I was like, oh, well, I'll pick it up later.
That's
And
great.
to then find out that I'll have the opportunity of chatting with you about it, it's kind of
Aw.
insane. But to know now that there is a musical component to this
Hmm.
really piqued my interest in reading the
Yeah.
book. And as somebody who's a huge like audiobook person,
Mm.
I noticed that a lot of the music has been incorporated in the audiobook. Now, when it came to writing the book, did you kind of want it to have that musical component in it?
So when I was writing the book initially, there were songs in the book, so there were characters. The book is, I mean, if you have the book, you know it's a bit surreal, right? And it's set in a
Yeah.
world of plastic figurines. And the main character, Erin, is very dissociated from reality in some ways. So when things get really stressful for her, music starts playing kind of in her mind in the background, and she breaks into song. It's a little crazy ex-girlfriend if you're familiar with that show. Um, and so there were those songs in the book, but it wasn't until the very end of the process when I thought, wait a second, what if this novel also has an album and, the album is part of the novel and it's like a joined project where people could actually hear this music and step away from the book and go into this musical world kind of with Aaron. So it was a later thought I had, but then once I started doing it, my publisher, God bless them, Pantheon Books, they're wonderful. They immediately got on board and got excited, and then the whole thing got rolling. So it was really exciting, and it was really exciting too to feel like the publisher and the project itself had room to sort of like stretch what a novel can be a little bit. It's always fun when you're dealing with a form that's like 2,500 years old or something to feel like you can do something with it that's interesting and fun in that way. Yeah.
Okay. I was that was something I was always kind of curious about because I've heard some people try to do this method, but there's such a way of how this album sounds.
Mm,
It makes it feel like it's a soundtrack to a movie. Like
hmm.
especially when listening to the audiobook format, it kind of carries the storyline in such a soundtrack way that you can't help but to be invested into the story with
Yeah,
it.
I think Scott found a good collaborator in me because I am both like a sort of a songwriter, pop music world person, but I also I compose music for film, like, my other half of my full time, my double full time. Um, so yeah, and when he sent me the drafts, early drafts of the novel, when we were talking about collaborating, it was easy to see it as both songs and film score kind of underscore. So the songs have like when we were looking for the sound of plastic, we did a lot of digging into just the like the raw sound, like what is the sound of these people, the sound of these plastic people's world feel like. Um, yeah, there's a lot of complicated layers to it because the sounds that they actually listen to in their own world are almost like unpalatably foreign for our world, if that makes sense. They listen to things like beats and whale sounds, right? Or the sounds of popping corks and planes
Yeah.
flying overhead. So,
It's sort of like ASMR taken to like a very extreme degree.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So we found, I think we quickly realized that that wasn't going to be the underscore for the
No,
for the
yeah, no.
Just
the
having whale
album or
noises in the
book.
backdrop.
Yeah, I mean, we considered it strongly, but I
There were
think
many,
it,
many conversations, yes, and then many
yeah.
ideas rejected.
We still make may create cork and plain music, but for
Yes, yes.
to find the sound of the world, I think we wanted to evoke the feeling of the world. Um, and so there were a lot of sort of like late night sound sessions, me sending Scott things and him being like, "That's the thing, that's the sound of this world. I really love it," you know?
And something Johnny said early on that was really insightful too, an idea that we then went with was we had all these lyrics from the book that were Aaron, and then we had Stranger Cat singing, who really embodied the character of Aaron so well. But it felt like the actual soundscape Johnny was creating, like that was the world of the book. That was the plastic figurine world. And he did such a great job kind of incorporating synthetic sounds with organic sounds that really kind of match the way in which like you have Aaron, who's a human being, and yet she's seeing herself as a plastic figurine. She's in this world of all these other plastic figurines. So like having a song where there's all this synth going on, but then also you can hear this really like haunting violin in the background too, kind of captured the emotional tonalities too. So not to get too in the weeds with all that, but yeah,
Yeah,
that was a big thing we were thinking about as well, is like how do you have a character front and center and a voice like Stranger Cat up front and center, which is so distinctive, but then craft this soundscape that feels like you're putting her in the middle of the world of the book. So yeah, the more we worked on it, the more it became less just like, oh, let's take these songs from the book and put some music to it, and more like, how do we create something that feels just as like full as the book itself? Yeah.
Was there a certain like boundaries that you knew for sure, like it's not going to be like too, not say plasticky, but like,
Mm.
but have that nice balance?
yeah. I felt like
Yes,
from the
definitely.
beginning that the characters in the book have this. Well, we know Erin's interior life, right? She's the main character of the book, and her exterior life is very plastic. So all the trappings of her life, the way that she speaks with other plastic figurines is very plastic, but she's got this sort of rich language in her interior world. So, and her interior life focuses on, she's it's very nostalgic too. She lives in the idea of this show called Nuclear Family, which her dad used to watch, if I'm correct about that, Scott.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so her head life is rich with language, and it's rich with this sort of subtle humanity. And then the world around her is this sort of like dark and dystopian place. The figurines are trying to make this world that everything is sort of um, perfectly hedged in and taken care of. But the actuality is that their world is falling apart, and the ecosystem is falling apart, and there are terrorists who are trying to wreak havoc on society to try to save the earth. So the plastic world is this beautiful sort of manicured spot, right, which we thought we could represent with the synthetic sounds. And then the real world is like sort of, if you can imagine, the plastic world is this beautiful like sheet of pink paper, and then the organic sounds are these inky tendrils of like ink
Mm.
just creeping through the paper and kind of slowly covering it with black tendrils of creepiness, that kind of thing. And so we thought about those two poles as being parts of the same picture. And then Erin, the irony is that she's a plastic figurine, but she's also like deeply human. That's the great sort of like dichotomy of the book. And her interior life is deeply human. So we wanted to represent that with like deeply human performances, and then organic instruments surrounding this plastic world.
And it was definitely a process too. It was a really like incredible creative process because when Johnny first got the book and we first started talking, it's like, oh, plastic, right? Plastic figurines, 80s, synth, here we go. And we started that. But then the deeper we got in, we're like, we're gonna need to, call all of Johnny's string quartet friends and things, and like and get some horns on the project and put some glass, and you can see the tuned glass Johnny plays in the background.
Yeah.
That's on there a lot. And so like even on the first track, I mean, it's one of my favorites, A Doll's House, the way it starts out. It starts out with this kind of like perfect piano riff, and then overlaying it comes all these kind of distorted, chaotic voices, and you can feel kind of like the chaos mingling in. And then Stranger Cat comes in singing, and she's singing Aaron's story, and then under it comes this burbling synth, which is very precise but also very frenetic. And I feel like right there, Johnny kind of sets up all the different musical motifs, right in like the first maybe 45 seconds of the album that you're going to be hearing then through all the songs. So it was a really wonderful process getting it to manicure it that closely, particularly having made albums in the past and been like in a band in the past and everywhere where we would like make a song and be like, well, that's a good song. And then like put it on the album to create something like this, which really felt like it mirrored the way I worked on the novel, where it was very editorial, very going step by step and making sure all the songs spoke to each other and the story flowed from beginning and end and everything. It was sort of the dream of making an album that I'd always had when I was younger and just sort of like throwing tracks on albums in a rock band. So anyway, yeah, that was a long ramble, but it was
No, no,
exciting.
no, that's good. That's good because like it opens up a different perspective of, the feeling of it. It does, it starts off with this really nice high moment of like it's a great start, it's a beautiful start, and then
Mhm.
it just slowly forms into this like not saying like decay feeling of remorse and regret, but
Mhm.
there's still joy and hope in there. And that's what I really enjoy,
Mhm.
especially with the
Oh, that.
song Only Killer is one of my favorites so far
Mm.
on this.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Um, Now I'm curious, like, how did you guys come across Stranger Cat?
I had worked with her before in a few different contexts. She's a singer I knew from New York, and we had a lot of mutual friends. Um, so yeah, we had done a few things together before, and I knew that she had, I don't know, she's very futuristic in her own music,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
she's also got like just like this hint of sort of 1980s DNA in her delivery sometimes, in her voice, in
Mhm.
a way that is, to me, that decade is very nostalgic. It's, I kind of was like really young in that decade, and don't showing my age here, but I didn't really have the relationship with the music of the 80s that I could have, but if I was slightly younger, or if I was slightly older in the 80s. But there's a nostalgia to that music to me, and Kat seems to have a little tiny hint of that in her
Mhm.
voice, and it felt right for this project. We didn't set out to make a album that kind of had little hints of the 80s in it, but we kept coming every time I would do something that had a little hint of it. Both Scott and I would feel like, yeah, this is like it's right to pull that decade into this project, you know. Um, and then once we had Kat, the first song she sang on was a song called Fiona,
Mhm.
and I remember pulling her takes up
It was
in the
so good.
studio,
It was
and
just so,
just
yeah.
and just kind of like sitting back in the chair and not even knowing where to begin because it was so good. I felt like I was hearing something iconic for the first time ever, and sort of just like raw in my studio.
And we were doing it all remotely too. So like I would get an email from Johnny and be like, "Here, check this out." And he didn't want to like bias me too much, but and then I remember listening to it with my wife and would just be like, "Oh my God." And you mentioned the 80s too, and it's great because in the novel, because I'm just obsessed with Kate Bush in every way, and there had been so much Kate Bush content that had been in there in a way that didn't really serve the narrative, just like me fanning out and putting in like Kate Bush allusions all over the place that had to be taken out successive like as readers went through as it got closer to the publication process. They're like, we love that you love Kate Bush, but this has zero to do with the story of the book. So it was so great to like make this album where like all the Kate Bush love could come like flooding back in. Not that it's like if you'd listen to it and be like, oh, this is so, imitative of Kate Bush, but it's like Johnny said, it's in the DNA. Yeah.
So you're
Yeah, yeah.
wait, let's say so you're basically telling me that this album is um a fanboy
Right.
appreciation for Kate Bush.
Absolutely. Uh, yeah. And if you look
Yeah.
carefully in the book, there are still little Kate Bush Easter eggs that are there. So, if anyone wants to email me with those, they'll get a prize. I don't know what that would be, but something. Johnny,
They'll
I
get a
interrupted
set.
you
They'll get
there.
a 7 inch. Yeah.
A set, right, a 7. Right.
No, I the the album itself has a lot of different sort of stylistic poles, and it is sort of really future leaning too, in a way.
Yes.
Um, and and Kat does have that hint of 80s in her voice, but she also has a very future leaning sensibility to her.
Hmm.
And Kat also can live in a very organic and a very sort of like, she does organic music. She like founded a choir in Brooklyn,
Yep.
so she's like very adept at doing organic music with her voice. But she also can like totally kick it up in like a pop music synth world, you know. So I knew she would know how to jump back and forth between those two things really well. And she's
Yeah.
also just kind of like a wild horse too. Like like you'll hand her something and you're like, I'm not really sure what she's going to hand back. It's going to be amazing, but
Yeah, no, that's the thing. Yeah,
yeah.
the whole thing took on a different level of personality and nuance, so yeah, that's awesome. And we're actually the release show is on Friday. And this is the first time we're all going to be together in person after over a year of collaborating together. So it'll be interesting to see if we all get along. Maybe we'll just have a big argument and
No, you just created like the best segue.
well, oh yeah, did we fight a lot? Is that the
No,
question?
no, no. I meant to say in terms of your release party.
Mm,
Um, I saw that it's being live streamed as
yes,
well.
yes, it is. Yeah.
So everybody will have the opportunity to see the live stream. And,
Mhm.
because everyone's going to be performing this live, how much have you guys been practicing?
Together, not at all. We're gonna be in the same room. Uh,
But Johnny and I have toured this project together a bit. So
yeah,
we've done a number of shows together, but this will be the
and
first one with Kat. Yeah.
yeah, and Kat and Scott did a short
Yes.
bit of
Yeah.
Scott's earlier book tour. So this
Hmm.
is the first time we'll all be together. But Kat's a total pro, and I rehearse up the wazoo, so we're gonna be great.
And
I
Johnny's
know that
already made like live versions of like essentially he recreated the entire album live and emailed it to us like long in advance. So we have sort of like the musical setting of the show. And yeah, it's just a strange way we all exist now that you can be truly in different parts of the country. I mean, Johnny's in Oregon, I'm in Indiana, Kat's in Miami. So, but we're all practicing and then we'll be meeting up on Friday, or I'll be meeting up with Kat on Thursday and then all of us on Friday. Yeah.
that's going to be amazing to be able to see you guys all working together in person. Granted, I won't be there in person for that
You
show.
should come, fly on out. Yeah.
Just fly on out.
Yeah.
Well, I will be seeing you guys soon because you guys are going to be on tour for
Yes.
the second half of your book tour.
Mhm.
I will be at the Ann Arbor location. So, with that in mind, this is going to be a combination of just a book tour as well as a performance.
Yes. And then for the Ann Arbor performance, I will be with Rachel Cochran, who's an incredible singer too. So I don't have Johnny and
Oh,
Kat for the entire tour, but I will have a different singer with me for that. And also happens to be my wife, but very brilliant. And
I
yeah,
was
so it's
wondering
gonna
that for a second because we had saw your name tag on there and
be
the
yeah.
wrong person.
No, I just happen to be married to this astonishingly gifted singer. So yeah, so we'll be doing a
And
bunch of
author.
and author. Yes, I should mention her paperback actually is out today for her Harper Collins debut, The Gulf. There you go. Promo,
Nice.
promo. But yeah, so those shows will be amazing. And we've done a lot of shows together too. So this leg of the tour is following up a whole bunch of touring in February and March where where we figured out ways to incorporate readings with live performance, and it's just been really fun to sort of like shake up the traditional form of a reading in a way too, because it's there'll be some bits of the book and then a song comes in and it's a different way of telling the stories.
Now you do bring up something that I'm kind of curious. Why didn't you bring your wife into the album writing process?
He
She
did.
was she was very much part of the album. Right? She did
Oh, okay.
she did not want to be on the record itself. I would ask, and she's like, leave it to I think she felt I was dealing with these high level. She didn't want, but every time I had a song idea or a melody idea that I'd be presenting to Johnny, my voice is like generously to say mediocre, not the best. So I would have Rachel sing these things, and then I could present like a fully formed melodic idea to Johnny as opposed to me croaking at him. Though there was that too, I think, actually, at a certain point. Yeah.
I do. Yeah. Only Killers, which is one of your favorites, is actually based on mostly on melodies that you and Rachel came up with. So
Yeah, I mean a lot of it,
Oh,
but you came in and like actually made it.
yeah, I turned it on its head and gave it some 5/4 parts. It just did kind
Yeah.
of weird
And
musio stuff to
and
it.
then, and then wrote the chorus.
Well,
There was that.
I only just threw in the 5 parts and the chorus.
He made it a lot. Yeah, he made it a lot better. To say the least. But Rachel was involved in all of it. Yeah, and she's an incredible musician. Has been doing music all her life. Yeah.
This is just me on a book reading question wise.
Oh, sure, yeah.
While reading this, I had stumbled on like several things, but the first big thing, can you please tell me what the Brad Pitt disease is? Because that's the one thing I've been like still trying to conceptualize.
Yeah, and Brad Pitt disease actually comes up in the album too. Somehow that like really stayed front and center. Yeah, so Brad Pitt disease is this. I'm gonna try not to laugh while I'm talking about it because in the context of the book, it's like very sad. Uh, it's the figurines, their plastic bodies begin to disintegrate into ash, so their skin, or I guess like their shell, I guess you could say, begins to change and it turns into ash, and so they start rotting and parts of their body breaking off. So the implication, I think, is that figurine plastic Brad Pitt got this once upon a time in the in the distant past or something like that. And the disease was named after him because it was a new disease or something, kind of like Lou Gehrig's disease or something like
Oh,
that.
okay.
Yeah, yeah. But then in the book, Aaron's father gets Brad Pitt disease, and I feel like in the beginning of the book, it's like this funny like wink, like ha ha ha, and then you see him actually die of it, and it's like, oh geez, this is like chunks of his jaw are falling off. Anyway, yeah. So
It
I
was like
feel
the
like
one
I
thing that
just
popped up.
I feel like I just guaranteed that like no one watching this will now read the book, with that little detail.
It was the one thing I was so curious about. There was a whole entire book. I'm like, so wait, why was Brad Pitt was used in the title of the disease? Like, I'm looking at pictures of Brad Pitt now, and I'm trying to associate what the version is
I'm a
correlation.
little I'm a little nervous that like Brad Pitt will actually get some sort of terrible disease and then it'll seem like I'm mocking his illness or something. So I really need Brad
Yeah.
Pitt to stay quite healthy for the satire, not to seem, cheeky. Yeah.
So, when it comes to writing this book and implementing lyrics into it, and now having that opportunity to have those lyrics be out in the open, um, I'm curious in terms of when you were first writing this, uh, did you like have this idea of like um, that this was going to be the start of something big, or was it going to be, or was it more of a like, oh, I'm just gonna toss it in there, I'll see how it goes.
Oh, in terms of having like songs in the book and
Yeah,
things like that?
yeah.
That actually came much later. So, the book had already sold and I was pretty far along in edits when one day I was writing, that character Morris, who's sort of like the dancing Jesus figurine. And, people who haven't read the book have no idea what it but there was one day where he was giving the character Max advice, and I thought, well, what if he sort of broke into song or sort of musical numbers seemed to suggest itself, and then from there I started incorporating more songs, and I wrote a few scenes around that, and then I brought it to my editor. Not quite sure how that would be received, but she was really into it. So she liked it and it worked. So then I did a whole bunch more, and then there were actually too many. And then we had to take some songs out. But some of those lyrics then became songs that Johnny worked on. So like the lyrics for the song Nighty Night Now, which is one of our favorites, didn't actually make it into the final book, but it was there waiting for us when we started. And that was actually the first song he wrote.
I do usually access on a like normal album, but you do have a music video out for
Mhm.
Fiona. Um, are we planning on seeing any more kind of stop motion animation for this album?
Oh, I don't know if we'll get to do another stop motion one. But there's a lyric video for Only Killers. And I think there's a lyric video for Until They're Home, which I'm going to be posting to YouTube very soon. And then maybe one more. I'd really love to do a video for the song Lightning, which isn't out yet, but I adore that song. And it'd be really great to figure out an approach for the video. But that might be like a month or two or a few, a little bit after the album releases, it might come out. But yeah, I'd love to do more video surrounding it. It honestly, the way the project developed, it felt, particularly with that Fiona video, it felt like this whole other phase of creation because I worked really closely with the animator on that, where it was so incredible to create actual visuals around the book. So yeah, it would be great to do another video.
Yeah, because I was kind of curious to see how because the Fiona video is very fun to see and kind
Oh
of
yeah.
get a better visual of like what I'm potentially looking at when I'm reading the book. So I was kind of curious to see what next would happen.
Can I ask you, did you feel when you, and I know I'm not supposed
Oh
to
yeah,
ask questions, but did you feel when you were watching the Fiona video that that was how you had seen the figurines in your head when you were reading? Did they match up or did it feel different? I'm just curious.
okay. So part of me thought of there was a particular toy company that made these toys for shoot what see it sucks that I can't remember. It's not saying so much like Barbie, but it's a like a discount version of Barbie that you would find at a
Right,
random thrift store somewhere, or not
right,
thrift
right,
store, like
right.
Dollar General kind of
Mhm,
locations.
mhm, mhm.
I imagined those when I was watching the reading the book. So because I knew like Barbie doesn't have, you know, elbows that move about, but
Right, 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 right.
seeing that version made me kind of confirm my idea. But I also there was a part of me that thought of like Little Peoples, that toy company for a good moment,
Mm.
until the arms started moving. I was like, oh, okay, so it's not that kind of size person. There were so many things that were going through my head
Oh
when
no.
reading it.
No, all that stuff I was, spent years working on the book being like, okay, how are the hinges work? Yeah, thinking about all that stuff. So that's really helpful to hear. That's great. Yeah.
I know like the for me like the biggest thing when it came to reading the book was I kept creating this persona that Erin was a like 3-year old
Mm.
watching the news, and it's her interpretation of the news in the voice and by playing with the dolls is her kind of reacting to the news
Oh yeah,
and the
that's a really
surroundings. That's kind of what's going through in my back of my head when I was
Mhm.
reading it.
Yeah, no, I definitely, yeah, that's great. Yeah, because it is so much that she's like dissociate. She's in a world that's so hard for her to process and handle that in every possible way, she's using the things around her to kind of like cope.
Yeah.
So
So, you know, if
there's plastic figurines, there's yeah, yeah.
it goes from like the plastic figurines to maybe her family's like a big church, religious person. So,
Mhm.
religion is a big thing for her. And so that's what kind of was like building up as I'm reading this. And I'm like, if at the end I am right, I'm going to be so upset.
It was all a dream. She was 3 years old. Yeah.
But yeah,
Plastic
that's,
novel version 2.
Version, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
sequel.
The sequel.
yeah, especially when it came down to like the absence episode, chapter, I
Oh
was just
yeah,
like,
yeah.
my mind was like, oh my gosh, what happened to the toys? Where is this girl? Where did she go?
I like that you
Obviously,
had this whole other world that
That's great. Yeah.
I think it speaks to the fact that you were trying to figure out that there was some other edge that you weren't seeing in the book, and that your mind filled in the edge, you know.
Hmm, hmm.
yeah, it's kind of like honestly kind of like with Erin in the storyline of her kind of creating that boundary of keeping some kind of level peace with having to watch the neutral family or not, yeah,
The
nuclear
nuclear
family. Why
family.
I don't want to say neutral in my head, but the nuclear family. But yeah, it was very interesting, and the dialect was what made me think for sure it was a 3-year-old.
Oh,
To look
that's
Oh,
along.
so
right.
interesting.
Right,
Yeah,
because it is a childish form of yeah.
that's what made me think for sure it was in that kind of perspective.
Yeah, I don't want to say how much of this book was like autobiographical in terms of my own feelings about the world and how much I feel like a 3-year-old like watching the news every day. So, but I think you're onto something there for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it was one of the one things I was like, okay. And I think maybe because I was listening to it as an audiobook for the first half of it before I
Oh
got,
yeah,
the
yeah,
physical
yeah.
copy.
Hmm.
Because I wanted to see, I think the big thing for me is like we were discussing earlier, the audiobook has such a more different tones and
Hmm.
there's two different narrators doing
Yes.
this.
Yeah.
And then on top of it, your guys' music is in between it,
Hmm.
Hmm.
creating that kind of cinemascope kind of feel to it. And so hearing the dialect in that tone, along with the music in the background, kind of ambience, builds up the scene in such a interesting format. Um,
Hmm.
I definitely love the fact that like Nuclear Family had a laugh track, so we
Hmm.
kind of had that weird edge of like maybe that she's watching a TV show, and she's
Hmm.
actually watching that
Hmm.
TV show, and it's actually like happening.
Yeah, I got so lucky with the audiobook. They really worked with me. A lot of times with authors, they're like, okay, you get to maybe express a preference on who your reader is. But because I had the album and all these things kind of going on with it, the producer really reached out to me and we were able to work on developing some of those stuff. And yeah, it was really exciting that I was like, hey, what if we like cut out lines from the text and put in a laugh track instead? And they're like, okay, it was amazing that there
So
was
with
that flexibility. Yeah.
so with that in mind, was the album done before the audiobook?
I would say the album was maybe 90% done. It was very close to done. And
Okay.
certainly we had finished all the songs that appeared in the audiobook. So we had all that. That was, I think, what made it easier to do as well. Is like we had all that stuff ready to go. They're like, oh, we were thinking you could have some songs for transitions. And we were able to just be like, okay, like here are 8 songs, and so it all came together really quickly. And audiobooks
Whenever
are made really quickly. I had not understood that before I started the process, but it's like a 2 to 3 week production window there. It needs to move along because there's so many books coming out from a place like
Yeah.
Penguin. So yeah, it was good that we had the materials ready when we did because I don't think it would have been possible otherwise if we're like, can you just wait a month? Like that wouldn't have been
Yeah.
a thing.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, that's so cool to know that because that's something that I think about when I listen to these audiobooks and I'm like, wow, they've released another audiobooks back to the sequel already. The book just came out last week.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I
So
got to have a call with Georgina, who recorded as Erin after she was done with it. And it was really interesting talking to someone who had just like essentially read the book 3 times in a row as the main character. It was just really unique, like to have that sort of reader experience of it, where it's like I had to become your character, perform as your character, and she's a brilliant author in her own right too. So it was really cool. Yeah.
now, do you picture her as Aaron, or do you still picture, Stranger Cat as Aaron?
Oh, this is a good question for Scott
That's
because
a good. That's a
we chased Aaron all over the futuristic plastic planet. Aaron is like a phantom
Oh, she's yeah,
in Scott's
yeah.
imagination, and it was hard to capture her in a way that was satisfying to Scott. She's so multifaceted. Sorry
That's
to
a
jump
that's
in
a,
on this,
that,
Scott,
that's
but
a
I
that's
am.
a generous way of saying that like I demanded like so many takes of every song.
Yeah,
Like,
there were
sorry,
times
Aaron
she.
Aaron wouldn't sing it that way. They're like, Aaron's not real. You understand that, right? I'm like, I don't understand that. Aaron is definitely real.
Yeah, Aaron is real, and finding out what version of Aaron is actually the real Aaron took some. It took some trial and error and kind of dialing in. But once we found it, to your credit, Scott, that's a great character. You know, there was no place where you were like, "This is right," that I didn't feel 100% wonderful about it.
Oh,
Like
that's good.
every time you said it's not right, I knew that after the first few times of trying to redial Aaron, I was like, well, he says it's not right, so let's try to redial this. I know it's going to be even better than it is now.
Well, you showed remarkable grace and patience as we worked on that. But now, yeah, with Stranger Cat as Aaron, and then the audiobook, and then the years and years I spent with Aaron in my head writing the book. Describing her as a phantom is a good thing because she's sort of like morphed and changed so many times, and it's just an incredible. It must be how authors feel like when a movie gets made of their book or something, and then you see like an actor portraying your main character or something, where it's like your initial inner imagination of the person then gets fused with these other things. And yeah, it's incredible.
With that kind of in mind, if this book was to be produced into a movie, adding an extra layer to everything
That would be
of
amazing.
who would be the new Aaron, the new movie version of Aaron.
Meryl Streep. No, I don't really know. Really. Johnny, who do you think would play Aaron in a movie? I don't maybe like
Uh,
Thomasin McKenzie or
I'll have
something.
to jump back into that conversation in a couple weeks when I wrap my head around the idea.
That's one thing I really do enjoy about this book was that it has such a like screenplay feeling without it looking like a screenplay. Because it
Oh
just
yeah. Mm-hmm.
because it was like open to a scene of a picnic back, of a
Right.
picnic field and not picnic field, but a field where there's picnics. Um,
Mm-hmm.
an overview shot, and I'm like, okay, well, I can definitely see this being a movie with no issue.
Yeah, no, if anyone were to adapt it in that sense, it is, I mean, Erin sees her life as a television show, as she's going through it. So and it would be an interesting thing if it were adapted, as if it were adapted, like if it would be animated or if it would be sort of there's I think the technique is called rotoscoping, where and Richard Linklater's done a few films like this, like Waking Life or Scanner Darkly, where you film people, but then you go in and like paint over the frames. I think you could create an effect that felt
Mhm.
plasticky that way. Or if it would be like the Barbie movie where it's like there's a plastic vibe, but it's actually people walking around. And so I don't, yeah, it would be interesting to see decisions that got made on that level, you know. And I'm sure
Yeah.
I would have, opinions at that time. Or maybe not. Maybe I would just hand it over, be so glad it was being made into a movie. Be like, this is what everyone. Yeah.
It could have a more like a Scott Pilgrim effect.
Oh, that's actually a really good reference point. Yeah. We'll have to reach out to Edgar Wright. Yeah, definitely.
Oh, I have a feeling he would love to do something like that. Not saying like I'm just a huge Edgar Wright fan, so
Oh, as
that's
am
my.
I. Yeah. No, he's great. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we're coming down to the end of our little interview. Uh, you got the book out, you got the album Friday, and then on top of it, you're going back on tour with so many different locations. I know I'll be seeing you in Ann Arbor. I'm curious on the first half of the tour. How was the reactions to the idea of doing a performance as well as a like typical book tours usually go with like, hey, here's my book, I'm gonna read an excerpt, conversation, Q&As, and then out. Oh, this one's more of like excerpt of the book performance.
There was one moment in our Portland show at Powell's that I always kind of like hold in my heart, where it was like at the Q&A after, and someone just sort of exclaimed, like without raising their hand, they go, "You make reading fun," which has an interesting implication that reading is not ordinarily fun. But I sort of I sort of got what they were saying, was that like they hadn't maybe quite like it it had it had changed a little bit, the traditional form of the reading, because what we would do at these events is I would, I introduce the project a little bit. I read a little bit up to a point where Aaron sings. Then all of a sudden, like someone else takes center stage, and the song comes to life in that way. And yeah, so I think it created kind of an immersive experience for people. And that's what I just love, is creating an imaginary space for people to go into, whether it's with the book or the album or both of them together or live. What are your thoughts on that, Johnny? Though on what the response was and people's experience was
Well,
live.
once we started the tour, I felt like it took us about a day to realize how integrated we could make the reading and the
Yes.
music. So it became very seamless after a while. There wasn't
Mhm.
like it wasn't like a hard cut off of the reading and then the music would start. So, me, I scored films and documentaries a lot of the time. So
Mhm.
I'm very accustomed to sort of making some beautiful, evocative world building sound under dialogue.
Mhm.
So when Scott would go to reading, I just realized I didn't have to really stop playing at all. I could just kind of underscore him until the right moment, and then cut out to silence. And that it just made us have very seamless, like a seamless evocative time together where we could really sink into the world of the character. There's something about having music behind the reading that
Mhm.
would, all of a sudden we'd feel like, oh, we can take our time with this and really sink into the world, and feel the audience sinking into the world with us in a way that felt, um, yeah, it felt like it kind of made time stop in the room for a bit. It was really nice.
It's definitely like the closest I've felt to being like a singer before, which is nice for someone who can like barely sing, you know. But the pace of the reading and responding to what Johnny was doing on glass or guitar or piano was, yeah, it was just magical.
Yeah, because you had been doing readings that were just sort of like the way that one would read it if you were just
You go up
reading.
and read, and it didn't quite work initially the way I was doing it, because I would just be barreling through the text as you would at a reading, and then Johnny was playing, and then we realized we needed to kind of be in
Yeah, by the
more in concert
second
with each other.
show, you were sort of modulating your reading so that it felt like it was floating on the music a little
Yeah,
bit.
yeah.
And all of a sudden I was like, oh, it feels like time is stopping in the room and
Mhm.
we're just in the world. So yeah, I wish I could do the whole tour. It's super fun.
Well, we'll still be able to get to see a portion of it with Friday's live stream.
Hmm.
And then, those who make it to the rest of the book tour will also have an opportunity to see a different version of it.
You can go to scottguild.com and everything is waiting there, all the stuff. So you can go.
Hmm.
Johnny, where should they find you?
Well, they can find me through links at scottguild.com. So no, I perform under the name Cindertalk. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like if you're thinking cinder block, but talk at the end. Cindertalk.com is a place where you can find all of my stuff. But go to Scott's website because it has the most stuff about this project, and my link is there.
But I will say Johnny has a solo album called The Aviary, which is one of the most beautiful things ever made. And for some reason, it's not on all the Cindertalk pages. So if you want to have your mind blown and go deep into like 2008, I believe, seven,
Yep.
eight,
Hmm.
eight, yeah, The Aviary. And then Stranger Cat is very much worth checking out. You can just Google Stranger Cat, and she'll come right up. And her album In the Wilderness is unbelievable. Yeah.